I never thought I'd be writing something like this. I've watched your channel for months, always wondering if I'd ever be bold enough to share my story. But last night, something shifted in me. I realized I had kept this locked inside for far too long, and now I need to release it. I'm 42 years old, married for 17 years to a man who, from the outside, seemed perfect. Tall, charismatic, successful, the kind of man who walks into a room and gets everyone's attention, and he knew it. That confidence, or arrogance, became a constant source of anxiety for me. I wasn't always insecure. In fact, I used to be the girl who turned heads too. But time, kids, routines, they shape you, soften your edges. And while I gave everything to our marriage, he gave just enough to keep me questioning. Smiles too long with other women, lingering touches, innocent work dinners that made my chest tighten. What haunted me most wasn't proof. It was the lack of it, the ambiguity, the not knowing. I tried to suppress it, convincing myself I was being paranoid, jealous, unreasonable. But when your husband's coworkers start complimenting his good looks in front of you like you're invisible, something inside begins to rot. We'd go to his office parties and I'd watch women laugh just a little too hard at his jokes. They'd touch his arm, flirt shamelessly, and he'd never stop them, never correct the narrative. He enjoyed being admired. And I began to feel like the invisible wife, the one who just stood in the corner, smiling tightly. I started dressing better, hitting the gym again, trying to remind him, or maybe myself, that I still had it. But nothing changed. If anything, he became colder, more distant. And when I confronted him, he gaslit me. You're imagining things. You're insecure. I began to question my own sanity. Then came that family wedding, his cousin's wedding, ironically. I wasn't prepared for what that night would stir up. That was the night I met him, Luke, my husband's younger cousin. Luke was nothing like my husband. He was rugged, quiet, but his eyes said everything. There was something wild behind them, like he saw through people's masks, including mine. When we shook hands, his touch lingered just a second longer than necessary. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was the wine, the music, the lights. But every time I looked up, he was watching me, not with arrogance, but curiosity, like he was trying to read my soul through my skin. And I let him. Throughout the evening, I caught myself smiling more, laughing at things I didn't even hear. For the first time in years, I felt visible, and my husband, he didn't notice. He was too busy playing the charming gentleman with everyone else dot at dinner. Luke was seated just across from me. Our feet brushed under the table, accidentally, at first. But after the third time, I stopped moving mine away. That's when I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. I didn't want to stop this. Later, as everyone danced, Luke and I ended up on the patio, just the two of us. The night air was thick and warm, and the silence between us said more than any words could. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. I was already on fire. He finally spoke. "He doesn't deserve you," he said, his voice low. I laughed nervously, brushing it off, but deep down it hit me like a slap. He saw what I tried to hide, my loneliness, my resentment, my craving to be wanted. That night, I went home with my husband. But in my mind, I was still on that patio, feeling Luke's gaze burning into me. I lay next to a man who didn't see me anymore, while fantasizing about the one who did. I felt disgusted and alive. I knew I had a choice. To bury it and move on like I always did. Or to walk toward the storm I knew was coming. And Brenda, I chose the storm. The days that followed felt like a blur. I went through the motions, making breakfast, kissing my husband goodbye, smiling at the neighbors, but inside I was unraveling. Luke had triggered something dangerous in me, something I had kept locked away for too long. I tried distracting myself. I cleaned the house obsessively, took longer walks, even avoided my phone in case he somehow found a way to reach out. But he didn't, and that silence became its own kind of torment. I hated it, and I needed it. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I received a text, just 3 words. "Are you okay?" My hands trembled. It was him, Luke. I stared at the screen for several minutes, unsure if I should even respond. But my heart had already answered. I replied with a lie. "I'm fine." But he knew better. He sent another message. "You don't have to pretend." That's when I felt something snap inside me. I was done pretending. Done living like my feelings didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. That weekend, I made an excuse to go visit a cousin. My husband didn't question it. He never did. He was always too busy with his own little world. That gave me the space I needed and the freedom I never thought I'd take advantage of. Luke met me at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. No one we knew would be there. When I saw him, my breath caught in my throat. He looked the same, rough, raw, beautiful in that dangerously masculine way. And I felt 16 again. We talked for hours. About life, regrets, frustrations. And underneath it all was the unspoken current. That heat, that tension, that pull between two people who were already too far gone. When he touched my hand, across the table, I didn't pull away. That evening, he drove me to his place. Nothing happened, not physically. But emotionally, everything changed. We sat in. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I hadn't slept much, replaying every word, every look, every electric moment with Luke. My body was beside itself with guilt, but my soul felt alive for the first time in years. That terrified me. I returned home before noon. My husband greeted me with his usual distracted kiss, barely noticing my absence. The way he scrolled through his phone while I stood in front of him made me feel invisible. And maybe that made what I did feel justifiable. That night, lying beside him in bed, I stared at the ceiling. I thought about how different his touch had once felt. How we used to talk about dreams, about growing old together. Now it was all schedules, surface conversations, and lukewarm affection. And still, I hadn't done anything yet, not physically. I kept repeating that to myself like a rosary of self-forgiveness. You didn't cheat. You didn't cross the line. But the truth was, I'd already crossed it in my heart. Maybe even in my soul. Luke texted me the next day. I can't stop thinking about you. Neither can I. His words stirred something primal in me. I remembered the way he used to look at me when we were young, like I was a wildfire he didn't want to escape. That gaze haunted me. I started seeing him again, under the guise of errands or visiting family. Each meeting chipped away at the armor I had built around my marriage. He wasn't just tempting me sexually, he was reminding me who I used to be, and who I still could be. He touched my face one afternoon and whispered, "You deserve to be seen." I didn't pull away. I let his lips brush mine, soft and slow, a promise wrapped in silence. That was the moment the dam broke. I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I wasn't just hurting. I was hungry for attention, for affection, for justice. Because while I had been holding my marriage together with trembling, the more time I spent with Luke, the more I noticed things about myself I had buried. I smiled without thinking. I laughed in a way that wasn't polite or forced. It was real. It was the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from myself in years. And I was scared of how good it felt. I would come home and look at my husband, wondering how he could be so calm, so unaware. Or maybe he was aware and just didn't care. That thought hurt more than anything. The idea that I could vanish emotionally and he wouldn't even flinch. One evening, I asked him about our marriage. I asked if he still loved me. He chuckled, not cruelly, just absent-mindedly, like I had asked what we were having for dinner. Of course. "You're my wife." That was it. That was all he said. I stared at him across the table, listening to the sound of our son playing in the other room. And I realized he loved the idea of me, the comfort, the routine, but not the real me. Not the woman I was, and certainly not the woman I was becoming again. Luke, on the other hand, saw me. He asked questions about my past, my writing, my dreams. He remembered small details, like how I hated cold coffee but loved the smell of rain. With him, I wasn't just someone's wife. I was a woman worth exploring. The first time we made love, it wasn't like in movies. It was desperate, messy, complicated. I cried afterward. Not because I regretted it, but because I felt like I had finally claimed something I had been denied for too long. Myself. I thought I'd feel guilt, but what I felt was strange relief. Like I had exhaled a breath I'd been holding for years. And in that breath, I wasn't someone's possession. I was my own. For the first time in decades, I felt free. And yet, I started noticing little things, odd behavior from my husband when I brought up Luke. He'd tense up slightly, his jaw tightening, even if he kept his words neutral. Once, he casually mentioned that he never liked that side of the family. I didn't push it, but my curiosity sharpened. It made me want to dig deeper. Why did he hate Luke so much? Was it jealousy? Competition? Or was there something I wasn't seeing yet? I began asking questions during family gatherings. Careful not to sound too interested, my sister-in-law mentioned they had a falling out years ago. Something about a betrayal. She didn't know the details, or wouldn't say. That silence only made me more determined to uncover the truth. If I was going to cross the line, I needed to know what I was stepping into. Meanwhile, my affair with Luke wasn't slowing down. We became addicted to our stolen time. Each touch felt more urgent, each glance across the room at family dinners more loaded. The tension was maddening and thrilling. It was like living two lives, and in one of them, I finally mattered. Found myself becoming bolder. I wore dresses I knew Luke would notice. I hosted dinners where I seated them near each other just to watch the unspoken war in their eyes. Part of me wanted to be caught. I wanted my husband to feel the burn I had. Felt for years, though he never said a word. Not one, and that silence gnawed at me. Maybe he didn't love me at all. Maybe he knew, and just wanted me to disappear from his life so he could play the victim. That possibility made my blood boil. Then, one night, Luke asked a question that changed everything. He looked at me, really looked, and said, "What are we doing? Is this just revenge, or is there something real here?" I didn't know how to answer, because the truth was, I didn't know either. That night, I lay awake next to my husband, watching him sleep like nothing had changed. And for the first time, I realized I was no longer seeking. In the days that followed, Luke began pulling away slightly. He didn't say it out loud, but I could feel it in the way he held me, like someone afraid to get burned. I think he realized we'd gone too far. Or maybe he didn't want to be just a pawn in my revenge anymore. That realization left me shaken. Had I used him? Was I becoming the very thing I hated in my husband? Someone who took what they wanted without thinking of the wreckage left behind? It haunted me. But deep down, I still craved what Luke gave me. I tried talking to my husband one evening, opening the door for him to confess something, anything. I told him I felt distant, disconnected. He barely looked up from his phone. "You're being dramatic again," he said, and went back to scrolling. I felt invisible. That night, I stared at the ceiling, feeling more alone in my marriage than I had in my entire life. And in the morning, I made a decision. I needed answers. Not about Luke. About my husband. I couldn't move forward without knowing if I was really the villain here, or just the reaction to one. I started going through old boxes, receipts, credit card statements. I needed something, anything, to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. I didn't want to be the wife who lost herself to suspicion, but I had to know if he'd ever betrayed me the way I was betraying him. It didn't take long to find it. A hotel receipt from 3 years ago. On a weekend, he said he was visiting his sick uncle. I called the hotel, pretending to be his assistant. They confirmed a woman checked in with him. Her name was familiar. One of his colleagues. My hands trembled as I hung up the phone. I felt sick, but also strangely relieved. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't evil. I was just reacting. That doesn't make what I did right, but it gave me clarity. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. I went to Luke's apartment that night. Not for passion, not for escape, but for... Luke listened in silence, never interrupting, just letting me speak. When I finished, there were tears in his eyes, not of pity, but something deeper. "You didn't deserve any of that," he said softly. "And I didn't want to be part of your pain. I wanted to be part of your healing." That broke me in ways I hadn't expected. I had seen Luke as an escape, a thrill, a moment of rebellion. But now I saw something more, a man who understood me better than the one who had slept beside me for 15 years. That terrified me more than anything. I stood to leave, unsure of what I wanted anymore. Luke reached for my hand, not to stop me, but to say something honest. "I care about you, not the married you. Not the angry, betrayed version, just you." His words stayed with me long after I walked out the door. At home, my husband didn't even notice I'd been gone all night. He was in bed, snoring softly, his phone beside him like a loyal pet. I stared at him, trying to remember the man I used to love. But all I saw was a stranger wrapped in the skin of someone I once trusted. The next day, I requested a meeting with a divorce attorney, Brenda. This wasn't a dramatic move. It was the quiet decision of a woman who'd finally had enough. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't crying. I was simply done pretending this life was mine. When I told my husband, he laughed, actually laughed. "So you're running off with the pretty boy?" he said, mocking me. "You'll regret this." I looked him in the eye and replied, "No, I regret not leaving sooner." I regret letting you turn me into someone I barely recognized. He tried to guilt me with the children, the memories, the house we built together. But I reminded him of the weekend in that hotel, of the lies, of the time I begged for love and he offered silence. For once, he had nothing to say. 2 months into my new life, I was finally breathing again. No tension in my chest, no fear of checking his phone, no dread of dinner table silence. I worked, I walked, I read. I felt human again, not perfect, but real. Then, one ordinary afternoon, I received a message on Facebook, a woman named Clarissa. Her profile picture was of a toddler, maybe 2 years old, with familiar green eyes. "I think we need to talk," her message said. My stomach dropped instantly. I ignored it for a day, thinking it might be spam or scam, but curiosity gnawed at me. Something in that child's eyes haunted me. So I replied cautiously, "Who are you? Why are you messaging me?" Her response came instantly, "Because your husband is my daughter's father." I froze. I read the message 3 times before it sank in. Could this be true? Had he cheated again, and worse, fathered a child? Clarissa wasn't vague. She sent screenshots, DNA results, photos of them together. A relationship that had started 3 years before my divorce. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But mostly I felt clarity. This wasn't just about emotional betrayal anymore. This was a secret life, a full betrayal of everything we'd built, everything he claimed to value. And I had spent years doubting my own instincts. Clarissa told me she never knew he was married. She found out after her daughter was born. He said he was separated. She confessed, ashamed. But then I found your name, your wedding photos, and I realized I was the other woman. I thanked her for the truth. In that moment, all my guilt. After finishing the email, I sat in silence for a long time. My hands trembled, but it wasn't fear this time. It was release. For the first time in years, I wasn't hiding from the truth. I was standing in it. I thought about all the women like me. Women who doubt themselves because of the lies they've been fed. Women who carry shame for reacting instead of blaming the one who detonated everything. I wanted to hug every one of them. I had spent so much time trying to be the perfect wife. Polished, composed, forgiving. I bent over backward to maintain an image, to keep the peace, to earn love. But love that must be earned by silence is not love, it's control. Luke's betrayal was layered and cruel. He took from me my dignity, my trust, and my belief in myself. But I took something back when I allowed myself to fall for someone who actually saw me. Even if it was for the wrong reasons, it awakened my truth. Now I know I wasn't crazy. The whispers I silenced for years were real. The intuition I buried under obedience was spot on. And in the end, what liberated me wasn't revenge. It was awareness. Awareness of who I am when I stopped pleasing everyone but myself. Clarissa and I stayed in touch. Not friends, but women bound by a shared wound. She's raising her daughter alone now, and I admire her strength. She gave me something no one else could, the missing piece of the puzzle I kept trying to finish in the dark. I look at Luke now with no more rage. Only pity. He lost a woman who would have stayed through storms, who forgave far too much. But he also freed me to become someone I never would have met if I hadn't been broken. So Brenda, if you do read this on your channel, the days after I sent you the email, Brenda, were quiet. But not in a lonely way, in a peaceful one. The kind of silence that comes when the storm is over and you finally hear your own voice again. I started journaling. At first it was messy, full of anger and confusion. But slowly, the words became clear. I began to rediscover parts of myself that I had long buried beneath compromises and expectations. I stopped apologizing for being emotional, for feeling too much, for wanting to be touched, seen, desired. I realized that my desires weren't sins, they were signals. Signals that I was starving for connection and being fed performance instead. Looking back, my affair with Marcus wasn't just revenge, it was rebellion. It was me screaming, I exist. In a life where I had faded into the wallpaper. He didn't save me, but he made me remember I was worth saving. I finally filed for a divorce. Luke didn't fight it. I think, deep down, he knew he had already lost me years ago. His cold acceptance was just more proof of the emotional desert I had been wandering for so long. When I told our kids, they weren't surprised. That shook me. I thought we had protected them from everything. But children always see more than we admit. And yet, Their love for me didn't change. If anything, it grew. My daughter hugged me and whispered, "I'm proud of you." That moment healed something no therapy ever could. Because for the first time, I wasn't Brenda. There's something I haven't told anyone, not even Marcus. After the divorce, I found a box in Luke's office while gathering my things. It was locked, but curiosity and years of betrayal gave me courage. I broke it open. Inside were dozens of letters. Not from another woman, but from multiple women. Names I didn't recognize. Some dated years back, some from just months ago. Each one filled with confessions, fantasies, promises. My stomach turned. I realized he hadn't just emotionally checked out. He had been living a secret life. There were photos too. Intimate ones. Some of the women looked young, too young. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. I felt nauseated. He had betrayed me on a level far deeper than I imagined. Suddenly, my guilt melted away. What I had done was a response. What he had done was a pattern, a calculated one. My marriage had been a lie long before Marcus entered my world. I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. I took the box and burned every single piece of it. Not out of rage, but to cleanse. To make peace with the years I wasted, the blind loyalty I carried like a chain around my neck. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, "You are free." And for the first time in decades, I believed it. My skin felt like mine again. My reflection no longer looked like a stranger. I'm not proud of everything I did, Brenda. But I'm no longer ashamed either. I love deeply. I hurt deeply. I made mistakes from places of emptiness. And then I filled them myself. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life from the ashes. I moved to a small coastal town, far from the neighborhood where I used to be the loyal wife. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. The colors poured out of me like truth. Marcus kept in touch for a while, respectfully. We both knew our time had passed. What we shared was born in the dark, and it had no place in my new light. Still, I silently thanked him for being the spark that woke me up. My children took time to understand. They were shocked, confused, even angry when I told them the marriage had ended. I didn't share the full story, just that we both needed different paths. I let them keep their image of their father. I didn't destroy it. I started therapy. I wanted to understand why I betrayed myself for so long. Why I silenced my desires, my truth, just to keep peace that didn't even exist. Each session felt like peeling off armor I no longer needed. One day, my therapist said something that struck me. "You were unfaithful. You were starving." And that sentence shattered me in the most healing way. For years, I had punished myself for needing what I never received. Tenderness, passion, attention. Now I know. Desire isn't a sin when it seeks connection. The sin isn't abandoning yourself to please someone who stopped seeing you. I will never again shrink myself to fit inside someone else's version of love. I've started writing my story, Brenda. Not just this letter, a memoir. I want women like me to know that reinvention isn't only possible, it's sacred. That survival isn't the end, it's the beginning of something wildly beautiful. And so here I am, 58 years old, finally. Choosing myself, not out of bitterness, not to make anyone jealous, just because I deserve it. Every scar has turned into paint on my canvas. And for once, I'm the artist of my own life. Brenda, when I first started writing this letter, I didn't know how it would end. I only knew that I needed to tell someone the whole truth, unfiltered. You became that someone, a safe place where pain and desire could be spoken out loud. Thank you for reading this far. Maybe the story isn't just about betrayal, lust, or revenge. Maybe it's about awakening, about realizing that we often betray ourselves long before anyone else does. And when we finally stop, we ignite something bigger than anger. We ignite freedom. The final twist, Brenda, came just last week. I found out my ex-husband had quietly remarried to one of those women from his office he always claimed was just a friend. A woman who attended our wedding, who ate at our table. Isn't it poetic? But I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel broken. I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, but a free one. The universe had wrapped the story full circle, and somehow I was on the outside, untouched, unbothered, and finally at peace. I'm dating someone now, slowly, carefully. He's kind, attentive, and doesn't make me feel like I have to beg to be seen, but even if it doesn't last, I'll be fine. Because the best relationship I've built lately is the one I have with myself. To every woman listening, Don't wait for a storm to wake you up. Don't wait to be chosen. Choose yourself. That's not selfishness. That's survival. That's sovereignty. I hope my letter finds its way into the hearts of those who need to hear it. Not to justify infidelity or paint myself as a victim, but to say we are more than the roles we're given. We are not here to be decor in someone else's life. So thank you, Brenda, for reading this, for giving voice to stories that live in the shadows. And to the women listening, tell yours. You never know who needs to hear it or how much it might set you free.